I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Arnie Weissmann, who's the editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly, based in America, and he's also the executive vice president of North Star Travel Media. Arnie is a seasoned observer of the travel scene, I think it's probably fair to say, and we're really thrilled to have him join us. Arnie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your company?
Sure. So I've been editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly now for 18 years. And prior to that, had other roles in travel media, business to business. I was actually over a dozen OAG branded publications based out of London. Prior to that, I had my own company, which provided destination information to the travel industry called Weissmann Travel Reports. And so my responsibilities now also include, as editorial director of North Star Travel Media, so we have Travel Weekly China, we have Travel Weekly Asia, and I have mostly a guidance role over those publications.
And these publications, I mean, are they mainly, I think chiefly of Travel Weekly in the USA, are they mainly focused to the USA audience, or are you finding that you're getting an international audience now?
We're getting an international audience, although still overwhelmingly US, overwhelmingly leisure. We have within the larger company corporate travel publications, meetings publications, incentive magazines. So Focusrite, I think people know, the research company, travel research company, is also owned by North Star Travel Media. So it's a broad portfolio that covers travels 360 degrees. My responsibilities are primarily with leisure.
And your readership, well, what is it like? Well, you must have a profile and a volume of it.
Sure. So yeah, we have most of the viewership is through the website for Travel Weekly US. We get about 2 million page views every month, which is pretty good for a business+publication. And the primary readership that we target is the travel professional and leisure. So maybe 80+% are travel advisors, travel agents. And then we also have the executives, anyone involved in travel distribution. So people in sales and marketing, the CEOs tend to read us. I certainly get letters and feedback from them when they like or don't like something that we publish. So it's very leisure focused, very much in that sales, marketing, distribution area.
Yeah, that's excellent. And a 2 million page, effectively a 2 million readership, means you're taking a significant chunk of the decision makers in the US travel industry, which is an enormous travel industry. I mean, from our point of view, of all the inbound markets for Europe, America dwarfs virtually all the others. I mean, Russia is a separate issue because Russia has obviously got a land border with Europe, but the United States dwarfs everybody else. It's an old point which we've made on many occasions, that 1 year's variation in demand from North America equals any of the markets, any of the other markets that Europe caters to. So if there's a 10–15% surge in bookings from America, that will be more than all the Chinese or the Japanese or any of the others. So it's of overwhelming import, the American market, and the current situation is of overwhelming concern, I think would be the right way of phrasing it. Arnie, we're arriving at the current situation, which we'll cover at the moment, on the back of a really very successful 2019. Last year was a good year. We were expecting a better year this year. Certainly all my North American members were predicting double-digit growth, maybe not massive double-digit growth, but it was certainly creeping into double digits, which was excellent news. And then March happened. And since then, frankly, we're in a coma. And I suppose the question really to you is, when do you think, what is the nature of the coma in North America? When do you think we're going to come out of this coma? And what the prospects are going to look like in the near future when we come out of this coma? So those are three separate questions for you. You can tell I'm not a professional interviewer. I'm trying to be a poacher term gamekeeper here, interviewing a journalist. But those are the three questions I pose to you.
Okay, so as far as the nature of the coma is that it is the pause button has been pressed, and it's not that there's no travel going on in the U.S. right now. But what is going on is domestic travel. So you're seeing actually some interesting sectors arising. Most interesting to me in some way is the recreational vehicle travel. People are getting these RVs and going and taking off because they can control their environment, they can control where they sleep, where they eat if they want, and can look out the window at the passing scenery. But I think the nature, to step back a little bit, what we're seeing for sure is that the countries that have had a strong national response and civic-minded residents and citizens are seeming to recover the most quickly. Those with a strong national central authority, of course, can really dictate what's going on. And what has traditionally been one of America's strengths, which is our independent nature and our sense that we can do whatever we want, is really working against us. And in terms of just getting this under control, it's a terrible situation where you seem to be making progress, and then because the citizenry is not, they can't even agree on whether or not to wear masks, which is just terrible. And so the prognosis for when this will be controlled in the US is very different, I think, from many of the other countries that have a more united approach to it. There's little federal guidance, and what guidance there is optional. We recommend this, we recommend that. So state by state, it varies tremendously. We just read yesterday, one of our reporters, our tour operator editor, actually lives outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico. And New Mexico actually has some very strict rules about wearing masks and all that. It borders Arizona and Texas. Arizona and Texas do not particularly have very strong guidance, but their citizenry love New Mexico. They're flooding into Santa Fe, and New Mexico is actually running ads in Arizona and Texas saying, "We love you. Maybe now is not the best time to come." And there are confrontations going on in stores in Santa Fe where people walk in without masks, and the proprietors are saying you've got to wear a mask, and they're not prepared to deal with any sort of conflict over this sort of thing. So this is a cycle, and I mean, I don't see the end of it in the U.S., to be honest. One hopes because domestic travel is fine for those involved in domestic tourism and attractions and things like that. But even those people get most of their business on the whole, if you look at the big pie, from international visitors. And that's where, it's a great export for the US, which is essentially dead right now. And there is the only cross-border tourism of any significance, and is of minor significance right now, is with Mexico. Mexico, their virus situation is not great. But they are taking the protocols that are in place in the resort areas are better than generally in Mexico. Some of the cities are certainly opening up. The WTTC, has this kind of seal of approval that they're giving. I'm unclear. I've asked some questions about how rigorous the process is in order to be certified a safe city. I've heard that you have to apply, you have to agree to do certain things, but I also understand that they don't have on the scene governance to see whether or not these things are actually being enforced. So I'd say North America, with the exception of Canada, is a mess.
Well, but in WTTC's defense, and ETOA, along with USTOA and Cato, produced our own guidelines for tour operators called TourCare. None of us are in a position to police these things. The main purpose is to act as not as a fig leaf. It's not a token gesture, but it's there to reassure clients that if they have concerns, these concerns are being met and they are being taken very seriously. Furthermore, as you pointed out, we have to issue blanket recommendations, knowing that the regulations in each destination vary. So, as you sort of said, the situation in Arizona and New Mexico is going to be different, and it's very difficult to dictate in such circumstances. No, but I mean, I think that's fascinating. And it's also fascinating the point that the US is a major destination now. And there was a period about 10 years ago when more money was being spent by Europeans in the United States than the United States was spending in Europe. And this was a major turnaround. I think it's shifted a little bit with the rise of the dollar and the rise of the American stock market up until this year, I hasten to add. We do appreciate it's a two-way street now, very, very much so. And it's going to be very difficult for Europe to really to make up the lack of American visitors, not least because so much is hypothecated around it. And I don't think you've got exactly the same situation in the United States, where Europeans coming to the States come and enjoy largely the same facilities and attractions that Americans do. In Europe, partly over time, the 4- and 5-star hotels that the Americans use in Europe tend not to be used so heavily by the European audience. So there's going to be a hole in that area. And then the Tower of London, 80% of their visitors are foreign. Anyway, we're getting off the subject. So that's what's happening in America. Do you see? I mean, when you say that you have more domestic visitors, we heard reports of people crowding beaches in Florida and elsewhere. Is this still happening, or is this petering out?
It's still happening. And I think there's even, I mean, this is anecdotal, and I hate to think of how history books will look at us and all of this, but they are young people. Young people see this as a boomer disease. They just don't feel that it is their problem. And there was sadly this case where some people in their 20s had a coronavirus party where they wanted to see who was going to get it first, and one of the people there died from it. I mean, there's a lack of seriousness of the appreciation of the seriousness. This is lacking on both the taking it seriously as a medical issue sometimes, but also the understanding of the macroeconomic picture of this behavior. As like I just read something this morning in the New York Times that a business person who owned a gym, so let's just close everything down for 3 weeks and get it over with, get the pain over with. But we seem to be enjoying spreading the pain over a very long period of time. And I wish I didn't sound so pessimistic on this, but going back to one of your earlier questions, when will we come out of this coma? I think it depends very much segment by segment. So you can look at the cruise segment, and they're to be fully operational. I think much of the cruise industry, if they're hoping to get a little bit of business, maybe December. They officially they're going to start sailing, they think, in September, but that's 100% up to the Centers for Disease Control. And they've made no indication one way or another about whether they're going to lift the no sail order that the cruise lines are under. And once the no sail order is lifted, it takes time to get on the seas, to get the ships ready and things like this. So, the vaccine is, of course, always out there. The hope, that this will be the thing that lifts this from us finally. But so 2020, I think, is generally speaking written off as any sort of meaningful recovery. I think people are hoping to get a little incremental business, but with social distancing, capacity is down. Whether or not that limited capacity and the laws of supply and demand being what they are, that they can raise prices to make up for it. They're not going to make up for it, but at this point, everybody is hoping for whatever cash flow they can get to keep as many people employed as they can in their businesses. But I think we're looking at 2021 spring, if you know, realistically, is I would say the recovery begins.
And I think this is not an uncommon analysis, if you find that reassuring. This is a widely held view, and we've been polling our members, and even at the start of the crisis, 75 to 80% of the respondents think that it's 2021 before they see anything meaningful. And I think the optimists who felt that there might be some real business in the final quarter of this year are petering out. I mean, there may be some business, and we'll get on to why there is in a minute. But I think this is generally the consensus. But I mean, surely, Arnie, what we've got is on one level, and we have to put aside the elephant in the room, if I may use that cliche, which is the fact that we don't have a vaccine at the moment, and that people are genuinely reluctant to fly and to go through airports, which is it represents even more of a threat in some ways than being on an aircraft. They're genuinely reluctant to do that, and if we can break that reluctance through a vaccine, through some form of reassurance, some of the underlying things are quite positive. I mean, one, we have, people call it travel credits, but I would say 60% of the people who booked this year, be it in groups, be it as FITs, they've rebooked for next year. So we've got almost 60% of what we were going to have this year being transferred into next year. You add to that the latent demand that we have in any year for travel. And on top of which, next year, if the airlines are flying, there are loads of ifs here. If the airlines are flying, we should be seeing plenty of capacity, and Europe, and I'm looking at it from a Europe-centric point of view, a Europe that as a traveling experience, you will have not had for 20 or 30 years, nor will you have in the future. You've got an exceptionally open destination, no problems with over-tourism in Venice or Florence or Rome or Paris or London or Barcelona. There are very few people, well, there are one or two obvious exceptions which you partly cited, but there are very few people saying we're sick of tourists being around here, we don't want them. People can be assured that they're going to be welcomed with open arms, with the exception of those places that have got a sort of xenophobic coronavirus hit, that they don't want to see people coming in from areas which might give them a disease. But that's a fleeting phenomenon which will disappear. So potentially 21's good, potentially. What do you think might make it not good, I suppose, is the question.
Well, I think that there's a worry. Right now, you're absolutely right that forward bookings are looking very strong across the board, tours, cruises, everything. What I think the danger could be is if it turns out that there are continuing hotspots. I heard one analogy, which I thought was really quite interesting, that said it may be that a coronavirus outlook is going to be somewhat similar to a weather forecast. So if you were flying to New York, you might have plans to go there, but if you see that a hurricane is threatening, then you're going to postpone and go somewhere else. But that if you are, you would check this, and that there can be hotspots. I think the thing that's going to be the odd part is the places where if a hotspot should arise, then yes, it's going to be very clear. What I'm kind of concerned about is the people who are from those hotspots. Will they be welcome? Will they be able to travel? And if you go on a tour and you find out that, let's say, Arizona is still a hotspot, and you find out the person sitting even 6 feet away from you is from Phoenix, then are you going to feel comfortable traveling? So we're going to have to sort a lot of this sort of thing out. A vaccine will be enormously helpful. And it may be like the types of vaccines you get now. If you travel to some developing countries, you have to have a yellow fever, vaccination. It may be that you have to have, countries will require that international yellow sheet of paper showing that you have the coronavirus vaccine if you're going to travel internationally.
Yeah, I think I think you're probably quite right. And looking at the escorted side of the business, I think this is going to be almost, well, we don't know, we'll see. I mean, there is a big debate as to when coach travel will start in a meaningful way in Europe, and at the moment we don't know. We don't know. I think that's interesting. Now, do you think it's going to have any permanent impact, this crisis? I mean, it's totally unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it in the 35 years I've been involved in this business. And certainly huge changes are taking place in the way in which we do business. We're talking, as our annual destination workshop, which would normally have 300-400 people in Billingsgate networking according to pre-assigned appointments. This is all online now. We're conducting this conversation online, obviously, and I think the workplace will have changed. Do you think travel is going to change? I mean, do you think it's going to be altered?
Well, I think, it's funny. My mother is 90 years old, and so she was born in 1930. And I said, do you have any memory when you were young of the 1918 pandemic? Was there any sort of lasting impact, for someone who was born 18 years later? She said no. So on one hand, I think that there will be a new normal, perhaps in some ways with vaccines. There's some concern that even a vaccine may only be good for a relatively short period of time. You're going to need booster shots a lot. That can be worked into all of our routine. But I think there's also a inherent in humanity desire, on one hand, to be around other people, to see other cultures, to do all the things that I'm a traveler, you're a traveler. We travel because we're really interested and we're curious, and I don't think that curiosity is going to die. When it comes to business travel, we can do these sorts of meetings now, but as you know, I've been to what were the old ETOA conferences, and it's who you have to sit next to around a table, who you meet in the hall, all those sorts of things that can't really happen on a video conference. Those are an important part of our lives, of our businesses, and we will work towards getting that back again. And I think we are going to have, our children in particular are going to have, I have a 19-year-old and a 17-year-old who, this will mark them forever. I mean, their school has been interrupted. They are probably going to have a heightened sense of awareness about sanitation and things like this. I hope that they don't become obsessive about it. But I think there is going to be some impact that may be somewhat generational. So there will be a lasting impact from this. Whether the next generation is going to feel it, that's really kind of the question, and it goes forward. It depends on how long a view you take. I do think things will normalize, but I also think there will be a lasting impact.
If you were to have one message for the European inbound industry looking at North America, I suppose it's obviously going to come back. When do you think it will come back?
So I think it will be a rolling recovery. I think that it will start with all these assurances that your association, other associations have put together that are going to get first the people who are just, that pent-up demand is real. The forward bookings, the people who said, I can't travel this year, but instead of a refund, I'm going to travel next year. Just go ahead and let's book that same trip. So, the desire is there. The desire to serve that demand is there. There's going to be practicalities, though, that are going to, I think, slow it down. So you'll see a rolling recovery in 2021, I believe. And it will pick up. And, you know, with the difficulty is I was corresponding with a cruise line CEO, and he said something that, you know, he has the liquidity to be able to say this. He said, we're patient. And so the patience depends a lot on your economic situation, you know, and there's danger in impatience. If you start doing things too soon and things go backwards, you've really just prolonged, you know, the agony. So we're all buying time right now. And whether we recover to the extent where we once were, you know, depends on our ability to survive until the recovery comes to a point where it's sustainable for us.
I think that's just beautifully put, and I think we'll leave it at that. Arnie, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Tom. Pleasure talking with you.